All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Venus Izadi. I'm a specialized solution architect here at Red Hat. And today I want to talk about ACS, or Red Hat Advanced Cluster Security for Kubernetes. Um, before I want to go deep down talking about what ACS is, how it can help you, what architecture looks like, I want you to just understand one thing. Like, if you want to memorize one sentence out of this presentation, you need to memorize this sentence, that ACS is the Kubernetes native security platform that it will help you through three different stages, like build, deploy, and running your applications in any cloud, in all major clouds. So your workload doesn't have to be in OpenShift or on Amazon EKS or anywhere else. Like anywhere it is, ACS can protect your workload in phases of in three phases: build, deploy, and running your application. Knowing that, let's start talking about what ACS is and go a little bit deeper. All right. So the agenda for today's talk is I will talk about a little bit concepts of ACS, what the architecture looks like, um, the use case, like what the benefits ACS will bring into your world and organization, and how it will be able you will be able to integrate ACS into your CI/CD pipeline, and talking about the cloud services that is upcoming for ACS and open source projects that Red Hat is involved with and ACS is based on. So they're technically the upstream part. All right. So we all know that all organizations are increasingly using Kubernetes platform. They're trying to manage the containers using microservices. They're trying to take advantage of all the immutable infrastructure they can use, right? And in this process, it's very important to ensure the consistency of security in all tech stack like that they're using. And by entire stack, I mean the supply chain, the infrastructure part, and the workload coming on top of the infrastructure. Um, so you're trying to align the security approach with all the different teams, with your operation team, with your developer team, and trying to make sure that everything is consistent between different teams, right? This approach is called DevSecOps. So it will be based on the DevSecOps model. And ACS can help you with this approach, having a DevSecOps model. And like technically the main benefits of having a Kubernetes native security approach would be you will have lower operational costs because you will have visibility, and it will be easier for you to manage the security issues without having to learn new additional controls. And of course, it will reduce your operational risks because you have the built-in controls to orchestrate and enforce all the policies that you are planning to apply to your environment. And you don't have to rely on any additional components in your environment. And also, it will increase the developers' productivity because you're giving them earlier feedback. For example, if anything goes wrong, developer can start working on that during the developing phase rather than just pushing the code into the product to deploy and being ready to be deployed into production. And at that time, they realize, oh, there's something wrong, and they need to push it back and say how they can fix that. So you are increasing the developer's productivity, and of course, it will lower your operational costs as well. So this is all the different touch points for ACS. I'm not going to go through all the the details here, but excuse me, you can see that ACS can tie into various image scanners, so you don't have to use StackRox one. You can use whatever you want. You can use Clear, you can use Tenable, whatever you want to use. Just bear in mind that if you don't use the StackRox scanner, it can do some of the enforcing, such as stopping a deployment if anything goes wrong. It can also tie into various CI/CD tool, so you can make it notify, kill the build, or kill the deployment, etc. If anything goes wrong, you can have that integration to different CI/CD tools. You can send a notification, like to some ticketing system, for example, Jira or any other system that you're thinking of. For example, if they find, if ACS finds a vulnerability, it can stop the deployment. In general, it has a generic webhook that if you're not following one of the policies, for example, something happens, it can notify and create tickets in your system based on how you integrated that. It can also tie into different security information and event management, like Splunk or any other tools that you're using. And the fun part is also it works on any Kubernetes distribution. So you don't necessarily have to have all your workload on OpenShift. You can have it anywhere you want. Bear in mind that the central part, I'm talking about the architecture of ACS a little bit later, but there's a component called central, and that is only supported on OpenShift. And for that, you need to have at least one OpenShift cluster. And but for the workload that you're using, it can be on any other clusters. So as we talked about, ACS is trying to follow the DevSecOps model, right? It's trying to shift left security. And by that, what we mean by shift left the security is development team and engineers team, they're trying to proactively implement the security earlier in the application lifecycle. So, and this will help them to minimize the security issues from rising later. It will be a lot cheaper and more effective, of course, but they will capture all the security issue earlier in the application lifecycle. It will enforce the zero trust for both segmentation and execution part. And you will have the continuously monitoring activity and runtime for all of your containers that are running on your clusters. So if one of your containers is running something suspicious or like doing something suspicious, it will be captured and will be reported by ACS. So by shifting left to security, we are all meaning that you have security earlier on in your application lifecycle, and it will go through all the phases of building, when you're building your application, when you're trying to deploy your application, and when you are running your application or containers, of course. But it will always trying to report back with the security issues. All right, so I'm not going through the details of this picture. What I want you to understand is like OpenShift or like Red Hat has an offering called OpenShift Platform Plus, and ACS is one of the components of this offering. As you can see, we have an offering called OpenShift Container Platform, that it has all the platform services, application services, data services, and developer services. It has Kubernetes underneath, and it has all the services on top of that. But this offering that we're talking about from Red Hat, Advanced Cluster Security for Kubernetes, is an offering on top of the OpenShift. I just had to mention that to make sure that we're clear about where would it sit in the Red Hat world. All right. So OpenShift that we talked about in the last slide, it comes with some security guards, of course, but ACS will have some add-on to that layer. So technically, ACS supplements the security capabilities of the OpenShift, and we will have like additional security on top of OpenShift. So as you can take a look at these white boxes, OCP has all these, by OCP we mean OpenShift. You can take a look at these white boxes that are the stuff that provided by OpenShift. And those blue boxes are all the additional security coming on top of the OpenShift provided by Advanced Cluster Security. So, for example, ACS will have the integration across the CI/CD pipeline. You can have that. I will talk about the CI/CD integration a little bit later. I will show you how it works, but just so you know that you can integrate that in your pipelines based on whatever pipeline you have. You can have the risk profiling and make sure that you understand how dangerous is an existing policy violation in your environment. The runtime behavioral analysis will give you the baseline of the expected behavior for the deployed workloads, and it will notify if anything goes wrong during the runtime of your containers and all the other ones. All right, so we talked about what ACS is, what does it look like, what the concepts of ACS would kind of look like. Now I want to talk about the architecture of ACS. So ACS uses distributed architecture that supports a high-scale deployment, and is optimized to minimize the impact on the underlying container platform. What does that mean? Let's take a look at this architecture. I'm going to use a whiteboard. Hopefully you can see this. So you install ACS as a set of containers in your cluster, and that would be included, like it will have two components. One central service that you install on one cluster, and this is central service. And there is another one called secured cluster service that you will install on each cluster that you want to be secured by ACS. Look at these ones. So these are secured cluster services. And I'm sorry for my handwriting. It's not very easy to do the clean lines. But you will install the secure cluster services on any cluster that you have and you want to be secured by ACS. So these are the components of ACS. Let's talk about central services. As we mentioned, you only install that on one cluster, and this cluster has to be, so central service has to be installed on OpenShift. Don't forget that part. So it has two components called central and scanner, these two. Central is technically the portal, the management interface for all the services that you're having. So all the API interactions, user interface, everything that you can see in ACS would be as part of central. And scanner is a scanner for scanning container images. So it will scan your it will scan your containers and analyze all the image layers and check for known vulnerabilities and etc. And let's talk about the secured cluster services components here. So as we mentioned, you install that on every cluster that you want to be secured. So it can be unlimited installations, and it has three at this part. Three components called sensor, admission controller, and collector. So sensor is technically a service responsible for analyzing and monitoring the cluster. So it will listen to your collector and make sure that it will get all these analysis from that. Admission controller is where you like all the policies are in admission controller, and if user wants to create a workload that violates any of those policies, it will report that. As we talked about, collector is analyzing and monitoring all the containers activity on cluster nodes, As you can see, this would be your cluster node. I'm sorry, I mean these ones, all of them. So collector would be analyzing and monitor all the containers activity all on your cluster nodes. And it collects all the runtime and network activity information and send everything to sensor. So a little note here that this was the architecture if you have ACS on non-OpenShift cluster. But if you have it on OpenShift clusters, there would be a little bit different in the architecture, and it would be having this fourth item, which is called scanner, which is a very lightweight scanner. It's a lightweight scanner version that scan images in your cluster. But other than that, the architecture is kind of look the same. And one little note is that ACS interacts with the following external components. These ones. I'm not going to go through all the details, but just want to let you know that it can you can integrate ACS with any other system, such as, like, as I mentioned, like CI/CD pipeline, your event management, your logging system, email system, or whatever you want to do with that. What else? Yeah, and where's the image? Okay, and image registries. So in here, you can say that you can integrate ACS with various image registries and kind of automatically configure that registry to report to your ACS. Kind of scan all the images inside the register. That's what I mean. So, one more point is ACS automatically configures registry integration for active images in your image registry by using the image pool secret in your cluster. But if you want for scanning inactive images, you must manually configure the registry integration, in case you're interested in that part. That was a very high level architecture of ACS, how it works and how it interacts, what the components of ACS is, and what's the difference of the ACS architecture for Kubernetes versus the ACS architecture for OpenShift container platform. Feel free to ask us any question if you want to know more details on that. All right. So let's talk about ACS use cases and kind of what kind of benefits ACS will bring into your environment. What does ACS offer, in another word? So just want to make sure that I say this before I start talking about these benefits, that we understand that each of our customers has different needs and requirements, as they should, because they all have unique businesses and business plans. And we want to enable our customers to easily configure and customize their environment based on what they want to work on with. So ACS would be a good talk point for that part, because it has all these parts that, for example, the configure management, you can ensure your deployments are configured based on your security best practices, or however you want to configure that. You can configure it based on your own environment, based on your own policies. It has other components like vulnerability management that kind of, it will just show you the known vulnerabilities in images and running containers. So you can handle that. You can see how you can fix that as well in your environment. It will give you the risk profiling, so you can prioritize your security issues in your clusters. It will show you all the network segmentation, how you can manage your network isolation and access control for each application, compliance in your environment, and detection and responses, how you can kind of respond to the active threats in your environment. You can get a better understanding of these items when we are doing the demo. I will recommend you to watch that technical demo. We go through all these items, and I will show you all the details. But just for your own information at this point, that these are the components that ACS will offer. All right, so now we have a better understanding about ACS. Let's talk about how we can integrate that in your pipeline, in your CI/CD pipeline. So as we talked about this before, ACS can integrate in your DevOps and security tools and help to enforce the security policies, to apply and enforce them, those policies in your environment. So you will have the like lower operational risk to your applications. It will also provide the developers with actionable and like a guideline they can use, and they can integrate that in their existing workflow. And this is how it can be done. So this is OpenShift pipeline, this this big box. This is technically the equivalent of the OpenShift CI, and it's based on the Tekton. So I want to talk about it through this context, but you can apply this for any pipeline that you're using in your environment. It doesn't have to be Tekton or OpenShift pipeline. But yeah, you can add your ACS for the vulnerability scans during the build time. So you can have a step in your pipeline and just do the scan of ACS and get a report. So developers, before actually thinking about deploying their application, they can see their vulnerabilities and kind of security risk, and they can prioritize that to work with them. And this chart shows the CD part, the deployment part, and it shows that so the CD, OpenShift CD, we call it OpenShift GitOps, is based on Argo CD, and kind of this image kind of shows that how after it passed through the CI, the build is correct. Before deployment, you can actually have ACS as well to go through another scan before you're deploying your application into a different environment. So in this image, you can see the hub cluster is where the lifecycle deployment or security compliance and risk management policies are defined, all of them. And it's kind of the central management point across clusters. Then it will pull images. So this is how it works. It pulls images from the Red Hat registry, pulling the day 2 configuration code from Git via the integration with Argo CD, and ensure that all the optional operators are deployed and configured. And then it will be decided that which admission controller should be deployed to which cluster. As you can see, these little boxes, like it will show, like, for example, this admission control with these policies should be deployed to prod, but a different admission control with different policies, if you are planning to do that, you can apply to dev environment or staging environment. And it will stop the deployment if anything goes wrong, and it will notify the admin. I don't have any image for the runtime, but that would be exactly the same to talk about it. So after the deployment, ACS still for active containers, it will actively scan them and make sure that there's no suspicious behaviors happening by your container. And if anything goes wrong, if anything suspicious is happening, it will kill the container and it will report it back to you. try to run it again. All right. So in general, all we talked about, it showed that the Red Hat technology lays the foundation for DevSecOps. But we also add a compelling security partner ecosystem on top of that to make sure that we have a comprehensive platform for customers and solutions to build on top of that. All right, so we have a new offering. In December 2022, we launched a field trial for ACS Cloud Service, and customers joined for free, and they had early access to the services, and they provided some feedback to our team. But technically, what is it doing is like a software as a service, so you can actually use that without installing the central part of the ACS. So this is the architecture of that. Technically, the central component is hosted in the cloud, and your customer will be responsible for deploying the secure cluster to wherever they want to, and capture all of the information and report back to the central. So it will be kind of easier to work with and quicker to work with. So for all the customers, they get technically all the benefits of the ACS, like vulnerability management, compliance assessment, technically out-of-the-box security policies that they can apply in their build, deploy, and runtime. And this would be the consumption-based pricing for them. So it would be as much that they use this service, they're going to pay for that. And it will be 24/7 support as well. So they're taking advantage of ACS in the cloud service. It is still in the field trial, but it will be out and official very, very soon. All right, so let's talk about the open source projects that Red Hat is involved with. One of them is StackRox, and it's an upstream open source project for ACS. So every time that we talk about StackRox, we're technically talking about the upstream project for ACS. There is a kubelinter, which is analyze Kubernetes YAML files and Helm charts. It can be developing it, expanded to scan operators in an environment. It's Claire, which is the static analysis of vulnerabilities, and there's Falco, which is a cloud native runtime security, and we contribute in Falco from ACS code base very actively. All right, so we talked about all the items that we like what's the concept of ACS, what the architecture looks like, the use cases, and how we can help your organization to shift security left. But just want to say that start working with that. It's actually very simple. You just need to designate a cluster to your central section. You can install the ACS in 15 minutes with their Helm charts or CLI if you want, and you get the report less than 15 minutes. So in less than 1 hour, you can get a report, a very good report of all the risk in your clusters, and what kind of action plan you can have based on that. If you're planning to do that and you need a start point, feel free to contact us, and we will definitely help you in that process. Thank you for your time. And again, as mentioned before, feel free to contact us anytime if you have any questions or if we can help you in this process. Have a great day.